My husband moved in with his mom 3 months ago. At least that's what he told me. I believed him because I'm a nurse with a 5-year-old daughter, too busy and too trusting to question his story. When he stopped taking video calls and withdrew large sums of money, my heart knew something was wrong before my head would admit it. Then I found the jewelry store receipt from Valentine's Day, a day I received nothing but excuses. The truth hit like a sledgehammer. My husband wasn't caring for his sick mother. He was living with another woman and their 2-year-old son in a house they bought 3 years ago. His mother helped him build this secret family while smiling to my face. They planned to drain our accounts next week and disappear forever. They thought I was weak. They thought I would break. They were wrong. I'm bringing our daughter to surprise him, but not for a happy reunion. This is the beginning of my revenge, and I will make them pay for every lie, every stolen moment, every fake smile. No forgiveness, only justice. From the moment David told me his mother had cancer, something felt wrong. Maybe it was the way his eyes shifted slightly to the left, or how his voice changed pitch when he described her symptoms. After 7 years of marriage, I'd learned to spot his tells, the small signs that appeared when he lied about forgetting to pay a bill or working late. It's stage 3, he explained, his voice appropriately somber as he packed his overnight bag. Mom needs someone there full-time, and you know how she is. Too proud to hire help. I nodded, remembering Eleanor's tight smiles at our wedding, her subtle criticisms of my career choice. Of course she should have family with her, I said. Amy and I can visit on weekends? Better not, David replied too quickly. The treatments make her immune system weak. Plus, you're at the hospital all day. We can't risk you bringing something home. That was the first red flag. Eleanor Stevens had always demanded family gatherings, even during flu season. Now suddenly she was too fragile for her only grandchild? The weeks stretched into months. David came home less frequently, usually just to collect mail or drop off small gifts for Amy. Our video calls became audio only because Mom's resting in the background. He'd call only at specific times, never during dinner hours, never past 9 at night. At the hospital, I maintained my routine, checking patients, administering medications, and recording vitals. My colleagues noticed the strain, but I brushed off their concerns. Single parenting is tough, I'd say with a smile, but Eleanor needs David right now. Then came the Valentine's Day when my husband of 7 years sent a text message. Thinking of you today. Mom had a bad reaction to chemo. Call you when I can. That night, after tucking Amy in, I checked our joint account and found a withdrawal of $3,200 from an ATM near the jewelry district, nowhere near Eleanor's neighborhood. Something cold and certain settled in my stomach. Your instincts are rarely wrong, my colleague Sarah said when I confided my suspicions during our break. My sister just went through something similar. She hired someone to follow her husband. I'd never imagined myself as the type to hire a private investigator, but as I signed the check to Meridian Investigations, I felt strangely calm. The anxiety that had plagued me for months crystallized into certainty. 7 days later, Michael Reeves from Meridian placed a folder on my kitchen table while Amy napped upstairs. You might want to sit down, he said. The photos were crisp, high resolution. David entering a colonial-style home in Oakwood Heights. David pushing a toddler on a swing set. David with his arm around a blonde woman, kissing her in the driveway. Eleanor, very much alive and not visibly ill, carrying groceries into the same house. The property was purchased 3 years ago, Michael explained. Deed is in the name of David Stevens and Lisa Chambers as joint tenants. 3 years ago, before Amy was born. The boy is approximately 2 years old, Michael continued. Based on my surveillance, David splits his time between this residence and his mother's actual home, which is about 10 minutes away. I stared at the photos, at the swing set in the backyard, at the birthday balloons tied to the mailbox. Is there anything else you need from me? Michael asked. Yes, I replied, my voice steady in a way that surprised even me. I need to know everything about this woman. Her job, her background, how they met. Michael nodded. I can do that. Anything else? Financial records, I said. I need to know if he's been using our money to support them. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying moments from our marriage in light of this new information. Had there been signs I missed? Was I too consumed with my career, with motherhood, to notice my husband building a parallel life? No. I refused to blame myself. This wasn't about my failings. This was about David's deliberate, calculated deception. A deception aided by his mother, who I had welcomed into our family despite her obvious disapproval of me. The next morning, I called in sick, something I rarely did, and spent the day going through our financial records. The pattern became obvious once I knew what to look for. Regular withdrawals, money moved to accounts I didn't recognize, charges at restaurants near Oakwood Heights, hotel rooms booked on business trips that I now suspected never happened. "Mommy, when is Daddy coming home for real?" Amy asked that evening as I tucked her in. "I miss him." I smoothed her dark hair, so much like David's. "I don't know, sweetheart, but I'm going to find out." "Can we go see Grandma Eleanor? Maybe she's better now." "Maybe," I said, kissing her forehead. "We'll see." After she fell asleep, I returned to the photos. There was one of Eleanor and the blonde woman, Lisa, shopping together, laughing over something in a store window. Another showed the three of them, David, Lisa, and Eleanor, at what appeared to be the boys' birthday party. A family gathering I had never been invited to. My phone buzzed with a text from David. "Mom's having a rough night, might not call tomorrow. Kiss Amy for me." I typed back, "Of course. Hope Eleanor feels better soon. Amy misses you both." The ease with which I continued the pretense surprised me. But I understood now. This was no longer about saving my marriage. This was about protecting myself and my daughter from a man who had been methodically betraying us for years. The next morning, I called my bank and inquired about opening new accounts in my name only. I contacted 3 divorce attorneys, scheduling consultations for the following week. I documented everything, every unexplained absence, every financial discrepancy, every lie about Eleanor's non-existent cancer. At work, I requested a transfer to medical records for a few shifts, citing professional development. There, I pulled Eleanor's file. Just as I suspected, her most recent physical showed no signs of cancer. No treatments, no medications, no oncology referrals. "You look more focused today," Sarah commented during lunch. "Did something happen?" "Clarity happened," I replied. "Sometimes the worst thing isn't not knowing, it's suspecting but not being certain." "And now you're certain?" I nodded. "Absolutely." That evening, Michael called with more information. Lisa Chambers worked as a real estate agent. They had likely met when David was looking to expand his investment portfolio. She had no criminal record, no bankruptcies, nothing suspicious in her background. "I don't think she knows about you," Michael said. "Based on their interactions, their neighbors' statements, she believes she's in an exclusive relationship. There's even evidence they had some kind of ceremony 3 years ago, though I can find no legal marriage certificate." So David had orchestrated an elaborate deception, not just against me, but against this woman as well. 2 families, 2 lives, with his mother as the accomplice who helped maintain the fiction. I thanked Michael and hung up, a plan already forming in my mind. I wouldn't confront David yet. First, I would secure my position, financially, legally, emotionally. I would document everything, build an irrefutable case. And when the time was right, I would bring it all crashing down around him. Looking at Amy's sleeping form that night, I made a promise. This man who thought he could discard us, who believed he could lead 2 lives without consequences, would learn exactly who he had underestimated. I wasn't just a nurse, a wife, a mother. I was a woman who understood how to observe, document, and execute a treatment plan. And David Stevens had a terminal case of deception that was about to be exposed. The hospital had always been my sanctuary, the place where chaos yielded to protocol, where even the worst traumas could be approached with methodical precision. Now I applied that same clinical detachment to my collapsing marriage. "Emma, you look exhausted," my supervisor noted during a shift change. "Everything okay at home?" I smiled the same reassuring smile I gave anxious patients. Just the usual. Single parenting while David cares for his mother. The lie rolled off my tongue easily, buying me the space I needed. I requested extra shifts in medical records, a department understaffed enough that my help was welcomed without question. There, I could document everything without arousing suspicion. I created a timeline of David's betrayal, cross-referencing his absences with our financial records. The pattern was unmistakable: large withdrawals before holidays, transfers to an unknown account monthly, almost like a salary. When Eleanor had actually visited the hospital for routine tests 6 months earlier, I pulled her records. No cancer. Not even suspicious findings that could have been mistaken for cancer. Just normal results for a healthy 62-year-old woman. The most damning evidence came from our home computer. David had forgotten to log out of his email account during one of his brief visits home. A separate mortgage, school tuition payments for Ethan, birthday party invitations that described David and Lisa as Ethan's proud parents. Each piece of evidence went into a locked drawer in my home office. Each discovery strengthened my resolve. "Mommy, when is Daddy coming home for real?" Amy asked one night as I tucked her in. "Soon, sweetheart," I promised, kissing her forehead. "But things might be different when he does." I consulted with 3 divorce attorneys, selecting Patricia Winters, known for handling complex cases involving financial fraud. The other 2 attorneys couldn't represent David now due to conflict of interest, a detail Patricia assured me was significant. "Financial infidelity often accompanies the emotional kind," Patricia explained after reviewing my documentation. "He's been systematically diverting marital assets to support another household." "What's my next step?" I asked. "Normally, I'd advise confronting him after securing your finances," she said. "But this level of deception suggests he might have contingencies in place." She was right. That night, I discovered transactions showing David had begun moving money from our joint accounts to an offshore account. The final transfers were scheduled for the following week. I moved first, transferring our savings to new accounts in my name only. I secured Amy's college fund. I changed the passwords on our investment portfolios. Then I called David. "I'm bringing Amy to visit Eleanor this weekend," I said, my voice deliberately bright. "It's been too long, and Amy misses her grandmother." His panic was palpable even through the phone. "That's not a good idea. Mom's having a bad week." "We'll take our chances," I replied. "Amy's already excited. We'll be there Saturday around noon." As I hung up, I knew he would scramble to prevent this visit. What he didn't know was that I wouldn't be going to Eleanor's house at all. I had a different address in mind. The next day, I contacted the Human Resources Department at my hospital. I explained that I needed to make changes to my benefits due to family circumstances. The HR representative was sympathetic, but confused when I asked specific questions about whether anyone else was covered under my insurance plan. "Let me check," she said, typing something into her computer. "Actually, it appears there was a dependent added last year, a child named Ethan Stevens." "That's interesting," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "Since I only have one child." "Amy." The HR representative looked alarmed. "This would be insurance fraud, Mrs. Stevens. Are you saying you didn't authorize this addition?" "Exactly," I confirmed. "And I'd like documentation of when this change was made and any forms that were submitted." By Friday evening, I had a copy of the insurance form with David's forged signature where mine should have been, adding Ethan Stevens as a dependent. He'd even managed to get the boy medical appointments using Amy's information, slightly altered. I added these documents to my growing file. Insurance fraud would strengthen my case significantly. Saturday morning, I dressed carefully. A simple blue dress, minimal makeup, hair neatly arranged. Nothing that could be perceived as threatening or unstable. Amy chattered excitedly about seeing her grandmother as I helped her into a pretty yellow sundress. "Remember what I told you," I said gently. "Grandma Eleanor might seem surprised to see us." "Because she's sick?" Amy asked. "Because sometimes grown-ups keep secrets," I replied. "But today is about telling the truth." I had prepared meticulously for this confrontation. I'd asked my friend Mark, a police officer, to park discreetly down the street from the address, in Oakwood Heights, ready to intervene if needed. I wore a small recording device disguised as a brooch. Legal in our state as long as one party to the conversation was aware of the recording. As we drove to Oakwood Heights, I rehearsed what I would say, how I would remain calm regardless of David's reaction. This wasn't about emotion anymore. This was about evidence and consequences. The house looked even more perfect in person than in the photographs. A colonial with blue shutters, carefully tended flower beds, and a child's bicycle abandoned on the front lawn. A family home. Just not my family. "This isn't Grandma's house?" Amy said, confused, as I helped her from her car seat. "No, but Daddy is here," I replied. "We're going to surprise him." I took her hand and walked up the stone path to the front, or door. Through the decorative glass panels, I could see movement inside. Someone responding to the doorbell. The door opened, and there stood David, dressed. Casually in weekend clothes I'd never seen before. His expression shifted from routine politeness to shock when he registered who was standing on his porch. "Daddy!" Amy launched herself forward, hugging his legs. "Emma!" he gasped, automatically picking up Amy while his eyes remained fixed on me. "What are you doing here?" "We came to visit," I said calmly. "Amy's been missing you terribly." Behind him, a woman's voice called out, "David, who is it?" A blonde woman appeared in the doorway holding a toddler on her hip. "Lisa and Ethan." From the photographs. "Hello," I said, extending my hand. "I'm Emma Stevens, David's wife." Lisa's expression transformed from friendly curiosity to confusion. "His wife? But I'm his wife." "Legally, that's impossible," I replied, "since we've been married for 7 years and never divorced." David set Amy down, his face hardening. "Emma, this isn't the place for this conversation. Let me get my keys, and we can talk somewhere else." "Actually, this is exactly the right place," I countered. "Where better to discuss your double life than standing between your two families?" "Daddy, who's that lady?" Amy asked, pointing at Lisa. "And who's that? Baby?" Before David could answer, a car pulled into the driveway. Eleanor emerged, her face shifting from determination to shock when she saw me standing there with Amy. "Grandma!" Amy called out, waving excitedly. "Mommy said you were sick, but you look okay." Eleanor froze, caught in the lie we had all been maintaining. "She is perfectly healthy," I confirmed, looking directly at my mother-in-law. "No cancer at all. I checked your medical records myself." "You did what?" Eleanor sputtered. "I work at the hospital, remember? Where you had your physical last month? Clean bill of health?" Lisa looked between us all, the truth dawning on her face. "David told me you were unstable, that you refused to accept the divorce." "There was no divorce," I said gently. "Just like there was no cancer. Just like there's no legal marriage between you two." David's expression shifted from panic to anger. "Emma, this is inappropriate. You're upsetting everyone." "The truth often does that," I replied. "Should we discuss the joint accounts you've been draining? Or the fact that you claimed both Amy and Ethan as dependents on separate tax returns? Or perhaps the insurance fraud putting Lisa and Ethan on my hospital policy?" The color drained from his face. "You're making serious accusations." "With serious evidence," I finished. "Documentation of everything. The question is, what happens now?" In his eyes, I saw the moment David realized exactly how thoroughly he'd been outmaneuvered. His shoulders sagged as he looked between his two families, the carefully constructed worlds he'd kept separate now colliding catastrophically. I turned to Lisa. "I'm assuming you didn't know about us. If you'd like to talk later, I can share what I've learned. You deserve the truth as much as I do." As I took Amy's hand to leave, David grabbed my arm. "Wait, Emma, we need to work this out." "We will," I assured him, "through my attorney. Expect her call on Monday." As we walked back to the car, Amy looked up at me. "Is Daddy in trouble?" I helped her into her car seat. "Daddy made some bad choices, sweetheart. And when grown-ups make bad choices, they have to face consequences." In the rearview mirror, I could see David, Lisa, and Eleanor, still standing on the porch, their perfect facade crumbling around them. Phase 1 was complete. The exposure had been executed perfectly. Now it was time for Phase 2, The systematic dismantling of David Stevens' carefully constructed life. Saturday morning dawned clear and bright, a cruel contrast to the storm I was about to unleash. Amy chatted happily in the back seat, excited about seeing the grandmother she'd been told was too sick for visitors. Grandma Eleanor might be surprised to see us, I told her. She might even act a little confused at first. Because she's sick? Amy asked. Because sometimes adults keep secrets, I replied, watching her in the rearview mirror. But today we're going to tell the truth about everything. I'd prepared meticulously for this moment. The small camera disguised as a brooch on my jacket, the copies of bank statements and medical records in my purse. The police officer friend parked discreetly down the block, ready to intervene if needed. The house in Oakwood Heights was exactly as pictured, a perfect colonial with blue shutters and a white picket fence. A child's bicycle lay on its side in the driveway. Wind chimes tinkled from the porch. I helped Amy from her car seat and took her hand. This isn't Grandma's house, she observed, confused. No, I agreed, but Daddy is here. I rang the doorbell and waited, my heart hammering against my ribs. Through the decorative glass, I could see movement. Someone approaching the door. David opened it, his face draining of color when he saw us. Behind him stood a blonde woman holding a toddler boy on her hip, Lisa and Ethan from the photographs. Emma, he breathed, stepping onto the porch and pulling the door nearly closed behind him. What are you doing here? Daddy, Amy launched herself at his legs, and he reflexively picked her up, his eyes never leaving mine. We came to visit, I said calmly. Amy's been missing you terribly. Lisa pushed the door wider. David, who is it? I smiled directly at her. Hello, Lisa. I'm Emma Stevens, David's wife. The confusion on her face would have been comical under different circumstances. Ex-wife, David interjected desperately. Emma, please. Current wife, I corrected, removing my phone from my pocket and pulling up our marriage certificate. Mother of his daughter, Amy. Who are you exactly? Lisa set the little boy down. I'm his wife. We've been married for 3 years. That's legally impossible, I replied, since we've been married for 7 and never divorced. David's face contorted with panic. Emma, let's talk privately. This isn't the place. Actually, it's exactly the place, I said, my voice steady. Where better to discuss your double life than standing between your two families? Eleanor's car pulled into the driveway at that moment. David must have called her in panic after I hung up last night. She emerged, her face a mask of fury that dissolved into shock when she saw Amy. Grandma! Amy waved excitedly. Mommy said you were too sick for visitors, but you look okay. Eleanor froze, caught in her own lie. She's perfectly healthy, I told Amy. No cancer at all. I checked her medical records myself. You did what? Eleanor sputtered. I work at the hospital, remember? Where you had your physical last month? Clean bill of health, congratulations. Lisa looked between us all, the truth dawning on her face. David told me you were unstable, that you refused to accept the divorce. There was no divorce, I said gently. Just like there was no cancer. Just like there's no legal marriage between you two. David set Amy down, his expression hardening. Emma, this is inappropriate. You're upsetting everyone. The truth often does that, I replied. Should we discuss the joint accounts you've been draining? Or the fact that you claimed both Amy and Ethan as dependents on separate tax returns? Or perhaps the medical insurance fraud, putting Lisa and Ethan on my hospital policy by claiming they were me and Amy. The color drained from his face. You're making serious accusations. With serious evidence, I finished. Documentation of everything. The question is, what happens now? In his eyes, I saw the moment David realized exactly how thoroughly he'd been outmaneuvered. His shoulders sagged as he looked between his two families, the carefully constructed worlds he'd kept separate now colliding catastrophically. I turned to Lisa. I'm assuming you didn't know about us. If you'd like to talk later, I can share what I've learned. You deserve the truth as much as I do. As I took Amy's hand to leave, David grabbed my arm. Wait, Emma, we need to work this out. We will, I assured him, through my attorney. Expect her call on Monday. As we walked back to the car, Amy looked up at me. Is Daddy in trouble? I helped her into her car seat. Daddy made some bad choices, sweetheart. And when grown-ups make bad choices, they have to face consequences. In the rearview mirror, I could see David, Lisa, and Eleanor still standing on the porch, their perfect facade crumbling around them. Phase 1 complete. 3 days later, Patricia Winters filed for divorce, citing adultery, fraud, and financial misconduct. The temporary orders froze all assets pending investigation and granted me sole custody of Amy with no visitation rights for David, a precaution Patricia insisted on given his pattern of deception. He's been served, Patricia informed me over the phone. His response time is limited. How did he take it? I asked. Not well. He tried to argue that there was a misunderstanding, that he and Lisa weren't actually married. Were they? They had some kind of ceremony, but there's no legal record. He never filed for a marriage license with her. So Lisa had been deceived even more thoroughly than I had. She believed she was his wife, while legally being nothing more than a girlfriend. The mother of his child, but with no legal protections. Lisa called me that evening, her voice shaky. Can we meet? I have questions. We arranged to meet at a quiet cafe near my hospital. When I arrived, she already had a table in the corner, the toddler boy, Ethan, playing quietly with a toy truck. Beside her. Is it true? She asked as I sat down. Everything you said? I nodded, sliding a folder across the table containing copies of my marriage certificate, Amy's birth certificate, and recent bank statements showing David's name and mine as joint account holders. We never divorced, I confirmed. David and I are still legally married. He's been living a double life for at least 3 years. Lisa's hand trembled as she examined the documents. He told me you had mental health issues, that you refused to accept the divorce, that you might hurt Amy if you knew he'd moved on. And you believed him. He was so convincing, she whispered. Just like he convinced me his mother needed care after her cancer diagnosis. Did you ever see any medical reports? Visit her in the hospital? Lisa shook her head. Eleanor always said she wanted to keep her illness private. I respected that. Because they both lied to you, I said gently, just like they lied to me. What happens now? Lisa asked, glancing at Ethan, who was completely oblivious to the adult conversation happening above him. I slid a business card across the table. This is Patricia Winters, my attorney. If you're willing to testify about David's deceptions, she might be able to help secure support for Ethan. Lisa took the card, studying it. He told me he was an only child with deceased parents when we first met. I only learned about Eleanor when she got sick. How many other lies has he told? That's what we're going to find out, I replied. Over the next 2 weeks, David tried everything. Tearful apologies, promises of reform, even threats. He showed up at the hospital one evening as I was leaving my shift. Emma, please, he begged, following me to my car. I made terrible mistakes, but I never stopped loving you and Amy. Is that why you had another child? I asked calmly. Started another family? Because of your overwhelming love for us? I got caught in a situation I couldn't control, he stammered. Lisa was pregnant, and I panicked. Spare me the excuses, I interrupted. Save them for the judge. When emotional manipulation failed, he turned to intimidation, sending late-night texts threatening to reveal embarrassing personal details if I didn't drop the fraud charges. I forwarded each message to Patricia, who added witness intimidation to our growing list of complaints. The hospital administration offered unwavering support once I explained the situation. They were particularly disturbed by the insurance fraud aspect. David had potentially exposed the hospital to significant liability. We're conducting our own investigation, my supervisor assured me. If our findings confirm yours, we may pursue separate legal action. At home, I maintained a calm routine for Amy's sake. When she asked about her father, I answered truthfully but simply, Daddy made choices that hurt our family, so he needs to take responsibility for those choices before he can see you again. Lisa proved to be an unexpected ally. Her testimony confirmed that David had deliberately misled both of us. creating elaborate lies that kept his two families separate. She provided emails and text messages showing how he'd manipulated her into believing I was mentally unstable and potentially dangerous. "I feel so stupid," she confessed during our second meeting. All the signs were there, the specific times he could call, the business trips that came up suddenly, how he never wanted me to surprise him at his mother's house. He was convincing, I assured her. He fooled me too, and I lived with him for 7 years. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for late July. Patricia was confident in our case, especially with Lisa's cooperation and the mountain of evidence I'd gathered. "He's claiming financial hardship," Patricia informed me during our final preparation meeting. "Says he can't afford proper legal representation because his accounts are frozen." "How unfortunate," I replied. In the courtroom, David looked diminished, his normally immaculate appearance rumpled and tired. Eleanor sat rigidly behind him, her expression a mixture of defiance and fear. When Lisa entered, taking a seat on my side of the courtroom, David's face paled. The judge reviewed our evidence with meticulous care, occasionally glancing up at David with thinly veiled disgust. When it was his turn to speak, David fumbled through excuses about complicated emotional situations and misunderstandings, about the finality of certain arrangements. The judge was unmoved. Temporary orders remained in place. Assets frozen, sole custody mine, supervised visitation to be determined pending psychological evaluation. Most damaging for David, the judge referred our evidence to the district attorney's office for potential criminal charges related to the financial and insurance fraud. As we left the courtroom, I felt a weight lifting. The confrontation had gone exactly as planned. The evidence had proven irrefutable, and David's carefully constructed house of cards was collapsing around him. Phase 2 was complete. The legal system now had him firmly in its grasp. Next would come the systematic dismantling of everything else he valued: his reputation, his career, and the comfortable life he had built on lies. The following weeks unfolded like a carefully choreographed dance, with each step bringing David closer to complete ruin. Patricia Winters moved quickly, filing for divorce on grounds of adultery, fraud, and financial misconduct. The temporary orders froze all assets pending investigation and granted me sole custody of Amy with no visitation rights for David, a precaution Patricia insisted on given his pattern of deception. "He's claiming financial hardship," Patricia informed me during our third meeting. "Says he can't afford legal representation because you've frozen his accounts." "How unfortunate," I replied. "Perhaps his mother can help him, or Lisa." But Eleanor's resources were also dwindling. My anonymous tip to the IRS regarding her unreported income from rental properties had triggered an audit. The tax penalties alone would consume her retirement savings. As for Lisa, she'd reached out to me the day after our confrontation, devastated by the revelation that her marriage was invalid and her son had no legal father. "I never would have gotten involved with him if I'd known," she insisted tearfully. "He told me you were abusive, that you'd threaten to take your own life if he left. And you believed him," I said, not a question, but a statement. "He was so convincing," she whispered, "just like he convinced me his mother needed care after her cancer diagnosis." I slid a business card across the table. "This is Patricia Winters, my attorney. If you're willing to testify about David's deceptions, she might be able to help secure support for Ethan." Lisa became an unexpected ally. Her testimony proved invaluable, particularly when David's attorney attempted to paint me as a vindictive wife manufacturing evidence. David tried everything: tearful apologies, promises of reform, even threats. He showed up at the hospital one evening as I was leaving my shift. "Emma, please," he begged, following me to my car. "I made terrible mistakes, but I never stopped loving you and Amy." "Is that why you had another child?" I asked calmly. "Started another family because of your overwhelming love for us?" "I got caught in a situation I couldn't control," he stammered. "Lisa was pregnant and I panicked." "Spare me the excuses," I interrupted. "Save them for the judge." When emotional manipulation failed, he turned to intimidation, sending late-night texts threatening to reveal embarrassing personal details if I didn't drop the fraud charges. I forwarded each message to Patricia, who added witness intimidation to our growing list of complaints. The hospital administration offered unwavering support once I explained the situation. They were particularly disturbed by the insurance fraud aspect. David had potentially exposed the hospital to significant liability. We're conducting our own investigation, my supervisor assured me. If our findings confirm yours, we may pursue separate legal action. With each passing day, David's options narrowed. His employer placed him on unpaid leave pending the fraud investigation. His mortgage lender initiated foreclosure proceedings on the Oakwood Heights property after discovering the fraudulent application. His professional reputation, built on carefully cultivated charm and trustworthiness, disintegrated as details of his double life emerged. Even Eleanor's social standing crumbled when her friends learned she had faked a cancer diagnosis to help her son maintain his deception. The community that had once embraced her now turned its back, leaving her isolated and bitter. At home, Amy and I established new routines. We redecorated the house, removing David's presence from our daily lives. When she asked about him, I answered truthfully, but age-appropriately. Daddy made choices that hurt our family, I explained. So now, he has to spend time away while grown-ups figure things out. The final blow came when David's attorney withdrew from the case, citing irreconcilable differences regarding defense strategy. Translation: David wanted to continue lying, and his lawyer refused to participate. He'll represent himself at the hearing, Patricia told me, unable to hide her satisfaction. It's almost too perfect. Almost, I agreed. The night before the final hearing, I received a text from David. Please, Emma, I'm begging you, call off the dogs. We can work this out privately. I didn't respond. The time for negotiation had long passed. In the courtroom the next morning, David looked like a shadow of his former self. His shirt was wrinkled, his tie askew, dark circles prominent under his eyes. Eleanor sat behind him, her posture rigid with defiance despite her obvious distress. Lisa sat on my side of the courtroom, her testimony already prepared. She'd brought documentation of every lie David had told her about me, about our marriage, about his financial situation. Judge Harriet Chen reviewed our case with methodical precision, occasionally glancing up at David with poorly concealed disgust. Mr. Stevens, she said finally, your conduct in this matter is among the most egregious examples of marital fraud I've encountered in my career. You've established a pattern of deliberate deception that extends beyond your marriage into financial matters, tax filings, and insurance claims. David stood, clearing his throat. Your Honor, I acknowledge my mistakes, but I've been portrayed unfairly. This was a personal situation that spiraled out of control, not the calculated fraud it's being made out to be. A personal situation? Judge Chen's voice could have frozen water. Tax fraud is not a personal matter. Insurance fraud is not a personal matter. Misappropriation of marital assets is not a personal matter. I can explain each of those situations, David insisted. Please do, the judge replied, leaning back in her chair. For the next 40 minutes, I watched my husband of 7 years attempt to justify the unjustifiable. He claimed financial pressures, emotional confusion, and at one point suggested I had been emotionally unavailable due to my demanding career. Lisa's testimony destroyed whatever sympathy David might have garnered. She described in detail how he had portrayed me as mentally unstable and potentially violent, how he had convinced her they were legally married when no such marriage existed, how he had used her to establish credit accounts under her name for his benefit. He told me Emma was institutionalized, Lisa explained, her voice steady, that she refused to accept reality. He showed me papers he claimed were divorce documents, but now I know they were forged. Eleanor's testimony proved equally damaging. Attempting to protect her son, she contradicted herself repeatedly until finally admitting that she had never been diagnosed with cancer. I only wanted to help David through a difficult time, she insisted, as if that justified years of elaborate lies. By fabricating a life-threatening illness? Judge Chen asked incredulously. You don't understand what it's like to want the best for your child, Eleanor countered. Actually, the judge replied coldly, I understand that perfectly. What I don't understand is teaching your child that lying, cheating, and stealing are acceptable means to that end. When my turn came, I spoke clearly and directly, presenting the evidence I had gathered with clinical precision. I am not here seeking vengeance, I concluded. I'm here for justice, for myself, for my daughter, for Lisa and her son, and for every other person who trusted David Stevens. His actions weren't mistakes or lapses in judgment. They were calculated decisions made repeatedly over years, causing financial and emotional damage to multiple people. Judge Chen's ruling was swift and unequivocal. Full custody of Amy with no visitation rights for David until he completed extensive therapy and parenting classes. All marital assets awarded to me, including the family home. Maximum spousal and child support based on David's earning capacity rather than his current unemployment. A restraining order preventing both David and Eleanor from contacting me except through legal counsel. Furthermore, Judge Chen added, I am referring the evidence of financial fraud to the district attorney's office for potential criminal prosecution. Mr. Stevens, your conduct extends beyond the jurisdiction of family court. As we left the ZI courtroom, David attempted one final appeal. Emma, he called, his voice breaking. Please, you've won. Isn't that enough? I turned to face him, aware of the courtroom staff watching. This was never about winning, David. It was about consequences. You chose your path years ago. Now you get to walk it. The criminal investigation proceeded with surprising speed. The district attorney, a woman with 3 children of her own, took a personal interest in the case. David was charged with multiple counts of fraud, facing potential prison time and substantial fines. His former employer terminated him officially upon learning of the charges. The Professional Licensing Board suspended his credentials pending the outcome of the trial. His credit was destroyed, his reputation in tatters. Eleanor, unable to face the community that now shunned her, put her house on the market. The for sale sign appeared just days after the IRS completed their audit, resulting in substantial penalties and interest payments. Lisa and I maintained contact, united in our determination that both our children would be protected and provided for, despite David's betrayal. With Patricia's help, Lisa filed for legal support for Ethan, ensuring that whatever assets David had hidden would eventually be found and used to support both his children. I never thought I'd be grateful to the woman my partner was cheating with, Lisa remarked during one of our coffee meetings. But you saved me from years more deception. We saved each other, I corrected her. Your testimony was crucial. At home, Amy gradually stopped asking about her father. His absence, initially confusing, became our new normal. We filled our days with school activities, playgroups, and weekend adventures that created new, happy memories to replace the ones tainted by David's deception. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I received a promotion at the hospital, becoming nursing director for my unit. The salary increase, combined with the divorce settlement, provided financial security I had never known before. As for David, I heard through mutual acquaintances that he had taken a night clerk position at a convenience store, the only employment he could find with fraud charges pending. He had moved into Eleanor's small apartment after losing both his homes to foreclosure and legal fees. The man who had once juggled 2 families, 2 homes, and countless lies was now reduced to the bare minimum of existence, his elaborate house. Of cards collapsed entirely. And I had only one step remaining in my plan, ensuring that his reputation would never recover, that his name would forever be associated with his betrayal. The final phase was ready to begin. The family court was quieter than I expected, its hushed atmosphere broken only by the occasional whisper or shuffle of papers. I sat beside Patricia, my posture relaxed and confident in a tailored navy suit, the same color I wore on the day David and I married. Across the aisle, David looked diminished. His once immaculate appearance had deteriorated. His shirt needed ironing, his tie hung slightly askew. Behind him sat Eleanor, her face a mask of defiance despite her obvious distress. Lisa was seated at the back of the courtroom, having arrived separately to testify. Judge Harriet Chen reviewed the case files with methodical precision, her expression revealing nothing as she examined the evidence Patricia had submitted. When she finally looked up, her gaze fixed first on David, then on me. This is one of the most thoroughly documented cases of marital fraud I've encountered in 30 years on the bench, she began. Mr. Stevens, You'll have an opportunity to respond to these allegations, but I must warn you, the evidence appears substantial. David stood, clearing his throat. Your Honor, I admit to making serious mistakes in my marriage. However, the portrayal of my actions as calculated fraud is excessive. This was a personal matter that spiraled out of control. A personal matter? Judge Chen raised an eyebrow. Tax fraud is not a personal matter. Insurance fraud is not a personal matter. Misappropriation of marital assets is not a personal matter. I can explain each of those situations, David insisted. Please do, the judge replied. For the next 40 minutes, I watched my husband of 7 years attempt to justify the unjustifiable. He claimed financial pressures, emotional confusion, and at one point suggested I had been emotionally unavailable due to my demanding career. Patricia leaned close to me. He's digging his own grave, she whispered. When Lisa took the stand, David's face drained of color. She testified calmly about his elaborate lies, producing emails where he'd claimed our divorce had been finalized, and I was institutionalized. He used my sympathy to manipulate me, Lisa concluded. I believed I was helping a single father escape an abusive situation. Instead, I became an unwitting accomplice to his deception. Eleanor's testimony proved equally damaging. Attempting to protect her son, she contradicted herself repeatedly, finally admitting under questioning that she had never been diagnosed with cancer. I only wanted to help David through a difficult time, she insisted. By fabricating a life-threatening illness? Judge Chen asked incredulously. You don't understand what it's like to want the best for your child, Eleanor countered. Actually, the judge replied coldly, I understand that perfectly. What I don't understand is teaching your child that lying, cheating, and stealing are acceptable means to that end. When my turn came, I spoke clearly and directly, presenting the evidence I had gathered with the same clinical precision I applied to my nursing duties. I am not here seeking vengeance, I concluded. I'm here for justice. For myself, for my daughter, for Lisa and her son, and for every other person who trusted David Stevens. His actions weren't mistakes or lapses in judgment. They were calculated, decisions made repeatedly over years, causing financial and emotional damage to two families. Judge Chen's ruling was swift and unequivocal. Full custody of Amy with no visitation rights for David until he completed extensive therapy. All marital assets awarded to me, including the family home. Maximum spousal and child support based on David's earning capacity rather than his current unemployment. A restraining order preventing both David and Eleanor from contacting me except through legal counsel. Furthermore, Judge Chen added, I am referring the evidence of financial fraud to the district attorney's office for potential criminal prosecution. Mr. Stevens, your conduct extends beyond the jurisdiction of family court. As we left the courtroom, David attempted one final appeal. Emma, please, he called out. You've won. Isn't that enough? I paused, turning to face him one last time. This was never about winning, David. It was about consequences. You chose your path years ago. Now you get to walk it. 1 year later, I stood at a podium, addressing the crowd gathered for the opening of the Truth in Relationships Foundation. The organization would provide resources and legal support for victims of relationship fraud, particularly those cases involving financial deception. Amy stood beside me, now 6 and thriving in our new life. She rarely asked about David anymore. Some people have questioned why I would create something positive from such a painful experience, I told the audience. The answer is simple. Transformation is the most powerful response to betrayal. From my position on the stage, I could see Lisa in the second row, Ethan on her lap. She had become an unexpected friend and ally, both of us rebuilding our lives from the wreckage David had created. What the audience couldn't see was the small television in the security office backstage, showing the local news broadcast of our event. I had arranged for a specific invitation to be sent to Eleanor's current address, a small apartment she now shared with David since both had lost their homes to foreclosure and legal fees. The camera would be capturing our success, our resilience, while they watched powerlessly as their deception became their legacy. David, now working as a night clerk at a convenience store after his fraud conviction made professional employment impossible, would see exactly what his choices had cost him. As I concluded my speech, I announced the Foundation's first initiative, a scholarship fund for children affected by parental fraud. The fund's name was deliberately chosen to ensure David would never escape the consequences of his actions, the Stevens Accountability Scholarship. Truth has a way of emerging, I told the applauding crowd. Not always quickly, not always easily, but inevitably. When it does, we have a choice about what to build in its wake. I had chosen to build something unbreakable, a new life for Amy and me, a resource for others, and a permanent reminder that some betrayals don't deserve forgiveness. They deserve justice. And I had delivered it, precisely and completely. The Foundation launch generated media coverage beyond my expectations. Local television stations carried the story, and several online publications picked it up, particularly after I shared my personal experience. The narrative resonated. A hardworking nurse discovers her husband's double life and transforms her pain into purpose. Within a month, we had received dozens of calls from people in similar situations seeking guidance. Patricia offered her services, pro bono for cases that met certain criteria, and other attorneys followed her lead, recognizing the publicity value in being associated with the Foundation. David's criminal case concluded with a plea deal: 18 months in a minimum security facility plus 5 years of probation. The sentence was reported in the local paper, with a reference to the Foundation I had established, linking his name permanently to his crimes. Eleanor attempted to rebuild her social standing by joining a new church congregation, only to have her past follow her when a member recognized her name from news coverage of the Foundation. Her attempts to paint herself as a victim of circumstances were met with skepticism and eventual rejection. 6 months after the Foundation launch, I received an unexpected call from my former mother-in-law. "You've destroyed my son's life," Eleanor said, her voice trembling with barely contained anger. "Are you satisfied now?" "I didn't destroy anything, Eleanor," I replied calmly. "David made his choices. I simply ensured there were consequences. He's served his time. He's trying to rebuild. But that scholarship with our name on it makes it impossible. Every time he applies for a job, every time he tries to move forward, your Foundation shows up in the background check." "That's the point," I said. "Actions have consequences. Some are temporary, others are permanent. David created a permanent scar in my life and Amy's. Why should his scars fade when ours can't?" "What do you want?" Eleanor asked, defeat replacing anger in her voice. "What would it take for you to stop this crusade?" "It's not a crusade, Eleanor. It's a foundation helping people who have been victimized by exactly the kind of behavior you and David engaged in. It's not going anywhere." I hung up, feeling nothing but a calm certainty that justice was being served, day by day, with every new client the Foundation helped, with every scholarship awarded, with every mention of the Stevens name in connection with fraud and betrayal. At Amy's school, I became increasingly involved, chairing the parent advisory committee and organizing community events. The other parents knew my story. I had never hidden it. And their respect was evident in the way they sought my opinion, valued my contribution, trusted me with their children. My promotion at the hospital led to another, making me the youngest nursing director in the institution's history. My experience with documentation and evidence gathering had honed skills that proved valuable in hospital administration, particularly in compliance and risk management. Life settled into a new rhythm, one built on truth and transparency. Amy thrived in this environment, growing into a confident child who understood the value of honesty. When she occasionally asked about her father, I answered truthfully, but without bitterness. "Daddy made choices that hurt people," I would explain. "And when you hurt people, you have to face consequences. Sometimes those consequences last a long time." On the 3rd anniversary of the Foundation's launch, we held a gala fundraiser that attracted community leaders, healthcare professionals, and legal experts. The event was covered by regional media, including a segment on the evening news that featured interviews with clients we had helped. As I took the stage to deliver my keynote address, I spotted a familiar figure at the back of the room, David, thinner, grayer, watching with an unreadable expression. Our eyes met briefly before he turned and slipped out a side door. He had seen what I had built from the ashes of his betrayal. He had witnessed firsthand how completely I had transformed his attempt to destroy me into something powerful and permanent. I delivered my speech without faltering, concluding with words that I knew would reach him, even in absence. The foundation stands as proof that truth, when fully embraced, becomes not just a shield, but a foundation upon which to build something far stronger than deception could ever create. Later that evening, as Amy and I drove home, she noticed a man walking alone along the roadside, his shoulders hunched against the evening chill. "Who's that man, Mommy?" she asked, peering through the window. I glanced over, recognizing David's profile in the glow of the streetlights. "Just someone who lost his way a long time ago," I answered truthfully. Amy looked at him for a moment longer, then turned her attention back to the book in her lap, the man already forgotten. David had become exactly what he deserved to be in our lives. Insignificant, a shadow glimpsed briefly and then dismissed, while we continued forward into the light. The foundation continued to grow, its impact widening with each passing year. Eleanor eventually moved to another state, unable to bear the weight of community judgment. David, after his release, cycled through menial jobs, his education and experience rendered worthless by his criminal record and the reputation that clung to his name. And I continued building my career, my daughter's future, the foundation that turned personal tragedy into public good. The woman who had once been betrayed now stood as an example of resilience, turning pain into purpose with a precision that left no room for doubt. Some called it revenge. I called it justice, administered with the same careful attention I had once given to my patients. The proper dose, at the proper time, creating precisely the desired effect. Perfect and permanent.